The era of the mainstream media is officially over.
Legacy media is dead.
You are fake news.
Sir.
Go ahead.
Crooked. The press is so crooked.
They're killing all their credibility. It's opening up the credibility to new media.
They're in a 24-hour digital surround sound that has nothing to do with CNN, has nothing to do with any stuff that we do. Twitch, Kick, and Rumble. So that sounds like you need to go to the hospital. What are these platforms?
Social media is now the news. It's become the most powerful thing on the planet. Wow.
This guy
It was November 5th, 2024, and here I was. I came all the way to America because I knew the world was going to change. I knew that Trump was going to win this election, and the reason why I knew? Because of one key change this time, and that was social media. The 2024 election was incredibly contentious. We had a tale of two different paths, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, probably the world's most liked politicians at this point, right? Kamala Harris's campaign was radically different to Donald Trump's. Firstly, she relied on mainstream media. The entire mainstream media was something like 70 to 80% of the media was positively geared for her. 10% was positively geared for Trump when it came to mainstream media. Secondly, she had sound bites, 20 or 30 of the same campaign speeches saying the same thing over and over again. Thirdly, she relied on soft podcasts, going on very scripted interviews and scripted platforms. If you think about it, it's kind of like a roller coaster. You had one candidate sticking to a roller coaster, doing exactly what they need to do, saying the exact things, scripting and sculpting their campaign. And then you have Trump on the other hand, which is this complete wild roller coaster flying off the scales, going wherever it wants to go, and no one's going to be able to stop it. He went on all the biggest podcasts, Joe Rogan, Theo, Lex Fridman, to get his message out there in an unfiltered format. He leveraged social media. And there's one secret trump card he had to literally trump the election, and that was Elon Musk. Elon Musk buys Twitter, and the whole world completely changes. The internet goes from this filtered and censored place to an unfiltered place where narratives can completely flourish like never before. Trump leveraged the power of social media as much as possible. He met up with influencers, TikTokers, streamers, all these sort of people to actually be the best to connect with and spread his message. Secondly, he stayed away from legacy media as much as possible. He knew that was not going to be beneficial to get into these arguments and matches with them. Instead, he had JD Vance and other people from his party go out and do his battling for him on the mainstream media side. And he went political rallying as much as possible. So to reiterate, how did Trump do it? Well, avoiding the mainstream media as much as possible and using his son and other people to go on there. Secondly, going on as many podcasts as possible that would be friendly towards him. And thirdly, leveraging the power of the internet. Trump's campaign compared to the 2020 campaign wasn't incredibly different, except that this time, the person that was running Twitter was somebody who said, let the free speech go, let's take off the guardrails, let's see what happens. And without that key element, I don't think Donald Trump wins. Sure, he might go on the podcast, sure, it might be out there, but when the internet is completely filtered and censored, we're looking at a completely different timeline. So why would Donald Trump pick social media over mainstream media? Well, here are some things that are moving in the direction of why social media has become so much more powerful than the mainstream media.
We are way off. We were laughing our butts off at Donald Trump and letting Charlie Kirk and Elon do a bunch of stuff online. We said, these guys are idiots. These guys are stupid. I asked my son, I got a teenage son, I asked him, who are the most influential people in the world today? I'm thinking to myself, he's going to say Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Jay-Z. He says, Kai Cent, Aiden Ross, Jinxie, and Sketch. I don't know who he's talking about. The mainstream has become fringe, and the fringe has become mainstream. There are people out there that are getting 14 million streams, and we're on cable news getting 1 or 2 million. Donald Trump understood that, and we didn't.
The mainstream media has traditionally been an arm of governments and of big business to enforce and to put out different narratives around the world. Traditional media can create a building overnight or destroy one in a matter of seconds. That's how powerful the mainstream media is. When a narrative gets pushed out around the world, everyone will believe it very quickly because these are trusted sources. The older generation have a strong trust in traditional legacy media. And the younger generation, Gen Z and Millennials, They don't. And one of the other things as well is that Gen Z don't really consume traditional media. Millennials don't really consume it either. Social media is just this addictive thing that you get the media and the news from straight away. The older generation still relies and trusts traditional legacy media, but that's on the way out. As they age out, the younger generation comes up, those legacy medias really are dead. And if you look at the statistics, Gen Z and Millennials will make up half of the voting bloc in the 2028 election. And there's so much distrust in the media now that people specifically like to get their news and media from social media. But the other problem is that trust in mainstream media has just dramatically dropped. And I think the biggest catalyst to that is COVID. When you had competing different messages happening all the time, and it's hard to stay on track as to what is actually happening. And there were some things where they didn't know exactly what to do, so pushing out a narrative, then finding out later that all the narratives that were formed a year and a half prior all didn't come true, then people aren't going to have significant trust in the media anymore, especially the younger generation who are deprived of being able to hang out and do things. And if you look at this, America has one of the lowest percentages of trust in the media around the world. So now we know that Trump used the internet to win this election, but what about previous elections? Why didn't he win the 2020 election? And why was the internet so much more powerful in trumping traditional mainstream media? Well, I've always been incredibly interested in these elections. As an Australian, it's always been something very interesting to us. A lot of people asked me when I went to America, why did you come here? Why is this election important to you? What happens in America? People say, oh, that's just what happens in America. No, policies and what happens there reflects all the way around the world. And specifically in my country, we might denigrate Americans, but secretly a lot of Australians want to emulate exactly what's happening there. What we see is that whatever happens in America, it'll happen in Australia in 4 or 5 years. And what you see is just around the world that conservative politics is rising again. And Trump's 2024 win was the nail in the coffin. So the date was November 5th, 2024. And here I was, West Palm Beach, and Donald Trump was announcing his victory just behind me. And I was shocked because I knew the world was going to change. I knew that we're heading into a totally different timeline that was starting right now. But to understand why this day was so important, we have to go back in time to the reasons as to what happened originally with these elections. So why has social media become so powerful now that it can literally wield elections? When Trump ran his 2016 campaign, he was one of the most negatively covered politicians ever. Hillary Clinton had it in the bag with over a 95% chance of winning. So how did Trump win the election with all the mainstream media despising him? Well, Trump used social media and his populism to catapult himself over the line. And when the mainstream media was so negatively against him, it was so easy for him because he was such a popular person to mobilize across everything and get people on his side to show how bad the legacy media was, how it was fake news. The internet was pretty much a Wild West still.
Yes! Madonna is here! On Monday Night Raw! He's here! Oh no!
There was a lot less censorship, a lot less internet interference, and the legacy media was incredibly strong. Hillary Clinton ran a campaign on traditional media. She used the tried and tested method that had been existed and worked from the last few elections previously. The biggest problem that Hillary Clinton had with her election was she had this email controversy that was spread by WikiLeaks. That specific thing really tied and changed the outcome of the election. And all the emails and all the alleged corruption was spread all over social media. She also relied on the mainstream media to be her friend, and the majority of the articles written about her were positive and barely any were negative. So that was a big key factor. The reason why she failed was because the internet was so uncensored. Clinton had the media so well in her pocket that Trump was all these bad things. He was a racist, he was a sexist.
And we're going to have a lot of fun tonight.
You're a racist!
Who the hell is I knew this was going to happen.
Trump's a racist!
There was so much negative mainstream media attention on him, and he was such a populist candidate that all the negative media attention would just keep continuing to go on and on and on against him. And then the internet had a completely different opinion of him, where it was spreading memes, showing Hillary Clinton's bad side. You had a large section of the internet working against the mainstream media to win the election. Now, Hillary Clinton's campaign said there was Russian bots and all these different things. It turned out to be completely false. This whole Russiagate thing was never real. It was just people mobilizing against the establishment, and Trump was that anti-establishment candidate. Because the media was so against him, it rolled up social media and rolled up people to want to be against her. He used that to win the election. So what happened in 2020? Why didn't he win the 2020 election? Well, this is a bit of a different story in itself. With the 2020 election, the media and the Democratic Party and other big tech were so shocked that Donald Trump win. He had a 95% chance of losing. It was nearly a in-the-bag moment for Hillary Clinton to win. And because they were so shocked that Trump won, tech companies and the media fortified the election. Ensuring the social media was heavily censored, there was a fortification with Facebook, YouTube, Google, Twitter, mainstream media, all coming together, as well as celebrities and other powerful people. They were changing the laws and the rules, and the Times agreed they were colluding to fortify the election.
The Time article admits an organized effort to fortify the election. Yeah, we engaged in all this collusion to make the right thing happen in the election. They did all of these things, including changing election laws. They acknowledge a collusion in order to make sure that the election turns out properly.
Legacy media still had a chance. It still had a way to get its message out there that was on rails and filtered. So big tech made sure they censored Trump as much as possible on the internet. And that led to a balancing of the media. But it was literally a filter because the social media organizations worked in conjunction with the mainstream media to put out official narratives. And when you're an anti-establishment candidate, how can you compete against that? The other thing they did was they deleted Donald Trump anywhere else on the media. They removed him, they deleted him, they just kept him away from the social media element. To not popularize him, they made the popular candidate unpopular by making him completely vanish. Finally, there was the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was Hunter Biden had this laptop with all these different secrets exposing what was happening. And the FBI came, 50 different agents came in to say the story was fake. It turns out it wasn't fake, so they suppressed it. And they went to Facebook and asked them to shut down the story, and they did on their request, which completely changed the outcome. And when you look at Biden, who had all the media in his pocket, as well as big tech working towards him, then it's really impossible for Donald Trump to leverage social media to win this election. So how is it possible for Trump to win the 2024 election? Well, what's the one key reason why he won in 2016? Populist movement, going against mainstream media and using social media to his advantage. Comes to 2020, he could not use that angle. So what changed in the 2024 election? Well, one man decided to buy Twitter, the most popular social media that there is out there.
His name is Elon Musk. He saved free speech.
And Elon's philosophy is that social media is the new town square. And he's right, it is. It's the newest platform for people to have perspectives. And when you control those perspectives, then there is no public discourse. It's becoming another arm of the mainstream media. Elon Musk is championing free speech. And for that reason alone, there's an equal playing field now for Donald Trump to go on there on social media and do what he needs to do. Kamala Harris relied on traditional mainstream media and the scripted performances to get across what she wanted to do. However, it didn't work out. Trump went on as many podcasts as he could to get out there and spread his message. The problem with mainstream media is that when you have a scripted campaign like Kamala Harris, you get specific sound bites, but you don't get to see the real her. And the advantage of podcasts and why they're so powerful and popular is that you get to sit down with someone for 3 hours and hear what they have to say. So you get to see who this person really is. That first hour, a person sitting in front of the camera, you get a bit of an idea. But hour 2 or 3, you get to really see who that person is. And it doesn't happen without Elon Musk buying Twitter. Elon Musk doesn't buy Twitter, then we're not living in this timeline at all. In fact, I don't think Donald Trump even wins the 2024 election. But what is the power of having unfiltered internet or a public space, like Elon Musk says, for public discourse? Well, the biggest risk to governments is that they can no longer control a narrative. When you have the mainstream media in your arsenal, then you can change and show what a story is and what a narrative is. But when you have social media that's unrestricted, then people can make their own narratives and people literally become the media. Like right now, I'm talking to you, I can give you my report on what I think's happening. I just went and covered the election in America and shared my stuff on the internet because that's how people want to see the media now. They want to see the real story on the ground as much as possible. And that's incredibly dangerous to governments because they see social media as one of the biggest hindrances against them. When people don't trust legacy media and mainstream media's perception is going down so quickly, it's no shock that social media will be the most powerful thing. And one of the most shocking things that I saw after Donald Trump won the election is that how the public discourse and narrative around the world has been changing so rapidly. Governments are going to bring in new laws, like we've seen already in Australia with their responses to Twitter being so powerful. Australia tried to introduce a misinformation bill. I think they call it MAD, Misinformation and Disinformation Bill. Essentially, they wanted to create a ministry of truth around what things they thought were correct and what narratives and labels they wanted to put on different social media posts. And thankfully, this was killed. This came out just after the election. Australia also passed an under 16 social media ban. And why does that matter to people? Well, essentially that means that they're going to have any social media that you use, you need to log on to that social media and they need to verify that you're actually that age. They'll either need to take a photo of you or you need to provide your digital identification on the internet. What this is a Trojan horse for the government to make social media platforms hand over the identities of the people that are on the internet. Essentially a tool for surveilling and making a digital identification for Australians. And look what else has happened. England, Keith Starmer, he comes out and says that globalism isn't working anymore.
Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. Global Britain, we got it wrong. And mark my words, this government will turn the page.
Because they've had so many issues, what's been going on around England with riots and people spreading their own version of events on social media, that narrative of migration and globalization is no longer working and gelling with the mainstream media's perception. The government knows that mainstream media narratives can't continue anymore. And they know they can no longer rely on mainstream media and that social media has been compromised than it was 4 years ago. It's no longer a censored place when you have one platform going out there and letting free speech and the actual discourse play out. And this is why you're seeing all these laws coming out and going onto Twitter, because they don't want those narratives to continue. And for the government to continue to publish narratives, it needs a control or censor social media. So they've retreated and they're re-strategizing on how they can do things next. So what that means is that they can literally put guardrails on things like Twitter and circumvent exactly what's happening. So what I'm seeing around the world is that the chessboard is changed. All the pieces are being rearranged. Governments can't enforce narratives anymore. They can't use the mainstream media as an arm to go out there and enforce what they're trying to say. And if you look at the election of 2024, this is exactly how Trump won, and this is how future governments and other movements can win as well. This is a risk to the governments and to mainstream media because it's so dangerous that it could literally change elections and change the entire world. If Elon Musk is by Twitter, then we're living in a completely different world. Trump probably isn't going to win that election. So what does this mean for the future? Well, mainstream media is going to have to adapt. And I think they're going to have to adapt in a couple of ways. Firstly, podcasts have become so powerful and so popular that they might need to find a way to get on them. And that might mean that these big programs might start running their own different podcasts and having a lot of different ways to get followers onto them. And I think government's going to play a catch-up game as to how they're going to filter and regulate social media. I don't think social media can remain in this state to governments. It's too dangerous and too powerful. There's going to have to be a series of events for things to change in order for people to give up liberties and freedoms. Look at 9/11. Look at how those events that happened on 9/11 radically changed the outcome of security, terrorism, and surveillance. That specific event completely changed the world. What I see with the internet is there needs to be a couple of specific events of people being radicalized on the internet, or those sort of things that happen with terrorism applied to a social media context, and then you might see a real regulation of governments. One thing that's here to stay is podcasts. I don't see podcasts being filtered or censored. It'd be incredibly crazy for that to happen. They tried to do it with Rogan during the COVID time period, and I doubt it's going to happen again. Social media is now entering a new phase. Traditional mainstream media is going to have to go into social media to win the attention and the narrative now. And with social media becoming the main source of media without the vetting of journalist standards, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that people like myself or other people that say that they're journalists are going to be unfair and biased? Does that mean that mainstream media just ceases to exist? I don't think so. I think it will continue to exist, but in a different form than it is now. Or will influencers cozy up with specific elements of the media to gain more attention and more traction? I don't know what the answers are. But what I do know is the way that it is now and how Trump won, just like the 2016 election, I personally feel there's going to be some changes from social media companies. We're going to be living in a totally different world in the future. And what people need to do is ensure they try their hardest to fight for their rights. We still have public discourse on the internet, but rights and freedoms can be evicted and eroded quickly. So that means that people need to go out there and ensure they're doing their part to keep the internet the way it is now. But it might be a matter of time before it's too late. So what do you think? Do you think the internet will be censored in the future? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see my video on the woman that potentially scammed the Olympics, the Australian breakdancer, you can do so right here.